All right, let's get right into this. It all kicks off with a claim that sounds like it's straight out of an alternate history novel. But this was said just recently, and it's about one of the biggest, most strategic pieces of land on the entire planet.
So that's Donald Trump. And yeah, he's talking about Greenland. The idea he's floating is that the United States should just, well, acquire it. He's talking about it like it's a massive real estate transaction.
And notice how this is framed. It's not some new, grand ambition. Nope. It's presented as fixing a huge mistake from the past. The whole perspective is, how could we have been so stupid to give Greenland back to Denmark after World War II?
But to really understand an idea this huge, you've got to look deeper than just geopolitics or grabbing resources. To get to the real why, you have to examine the psychological engine that's actually driving these kinds of statements.
And according to political psychologist Vlad Vexler, what we're looking at here isn't just a big ego or simple vanity. He argues we're talking about a personality disorder. It's a fundamental lens that shapes how a person sees the world, where literally every single action is dictated by this overpowering, insatiable need.
That need is for something called narcissistic supply. Now, this can be a positive thing, right? Like the cheers and adoration from a crowd. But when that's not available, Vexler suggests it can take a much darker form, where the person gets a kind of satisfaction, a thrill from being seen as powerfully destructive.
And based on this psychological framework, that constant need for supply forces the individual to sort everyone into two simple groups. You've got the people who are idealized, like Putin, because they're seen as providing that supply. And then there's everyone else, people like Zelensky, who don't provide that supply. So they're just dismissed. They basically cease to exist. This brings us to a really interesting concept, the false self. Vexler argues that for a narcissist, there isn't an authentic, stable self on the inside. Instead, it's just a construct, a shell that needs constant external validation just to regulate itself. And what that means is there's not much room for growth because the person is locked into repeating the same patterns, chasing the same validation over and over again.
This model gives us a way to understand the idealization of figures like Putin. According to this view, it's not really about the actual man or his policies. It's about creating this idealized, powerful image in one's own mind. And by getting close to that created image, you get to share in its power, to bask in its glow.
So what you end up with is this incredibly lopsided, asymmetrical relationship. The analysis from Vexler suggests that one leader's actions are driven entirely by a need for psychological validation, while the other leader can leverage that dynamic to pursue very specific, very real political goals.
But look, this isn't just some abstract theory in a psychology textbook. This stuff is having tangible, honestly, kind of frightening effects in the real world. The tremors are being felt right now across Western alliances.
I mean, even staunch political allies are raising red flags. Nigel Farage, a key player in the Brexit movement, called the rhetoric a very hostile act. He even compared the potential damage to international relationships to the Suez Crisis of 1956. That is a huge statement. This has pushed some of America's closest allies to start planning for scenarios that were, until now, completely unthinkable. For example, leaked documents show that Canadian military planners have been modeling what would happen in a potential U.S. invasion. Let that sink in for a minute. Canada. And their assessment is brutally realistic. They know they couldn't win a conventional war. So the strategy completely shifts to unconventional warfare. We're talking ambushes, sabotage, hit-and-run tactics, and the stated goal of this plan is just chilling, to inflict mass casualties on any invading force. And this kind of extreme planning seems to be a direct response to rhetoric just like this. These statements are being perceived by allies, including Canada, as direct threats, which in turn is prompting them to consider these drastic defensive measures. So how did we get here? Vexler argues that this isn't just about one individual. He points to a sickness in our entire information ecosystem. Things like post-truth politics, fragmented news cycles, and the social media outrage machine. He believes these things create the perfect environment for certain personality types to thrive. And this creates a really dangerous feedback loop. A culture where objective facts are losing their value becomes more susceptible to leaders who operate outside of reality. And then, the success of those leaders reinforces those exact same cultural trends, making the society even sicker. So, this whole analysis ends with a critical warning. The concern isn't just about surviving the chaos of one particular leader's term in office. It's about what might come next. The fear is that one style of chaotic leadership just normalizes breaking the rules and weakens our institutions, potentially paving the way for a very different type of authoritarian figure, one who is colder, more disciplined, and far more dangerous.